you don't have to listen to me this time. You get to listen to 3 folks from the real world who are doing the work. But as I was thinking about the panel this morning, I was just reminded of one thing that happened to me in January. I was doing the the Women's March, but here in Oakland. And I was with my 2 daughters, and we happened to be marching at one point next to 2 older women, probably in their 80s. And one of the women turned to the other woman and said, "I can't believe we're still marching for this shit." And, so I only say that because, I just hope we don't have to have this conference. Like, in many ways, we want to have it bigger, 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 but in many ways, we don't. So I was struggling with that this morning. And then I want to turn it over to the folks who are doing. So I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourself briefly and say what you do, and if you have any connection to Berkeley, because the other panel all have these cool connections to Berkeley. So, Sonja.
All right, I'm Sonja, Gittens, Ottley. I lead diversity and inclusion at a company called Asana. It's a work tracking and management tool that allows teams to work together better. Diversity and inclusion, it's threefold. It's about building a culture that's really transparent and wants to understand why we have all of these different people that come from different backgrounds and how can we support them better. And inclusion is, I've been hired by this company, how do I succeed and be my full self? So I look at it from all sides, from culture to recruiting to inclusion and engagement and belonging. I'm not from the Bay Area. I'm not from the United States. I'm from a small 2-island nation called Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean, and it's the best place in the world besides your great country.
And how did it survive?
We're out of the hurricane belt, and we don't do tourism, we do oil, so we are a whole different.
You're protected.
Yeah, we're a whole different nation.
Charles.
Hi, I'm Charles Thomas. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at General Motors, and we make data. We also happen to make automobiles, but I'm trying to get them to change their perspective because the automobiles generate more data than most other vehicles. And when I say vehicles, I mean computers or other kinds of technology. And so really what I'm charged with doing is helping them use this information to really turn them into new products that we can sell back to our customers, our suppliers, our dealers, as well as make them available because lots of other people want to know, is there a correlation between whether you drive too fast or press too hard on the brakes and credit worthiness, for example. And there is, actually, as you could possibly imagine. So we've got you now. But really what this is requiring is a transformation. And the transformation has to rely upon different thinking. When I look around my boss's leadership table, not only am I the least tenured because I've been there 6 whole weeks, but if I'd been there 37 years, I'd be the least tenured person. And so, the bottom line is that you have a long-term, very homogenous culture that you're really having to drive change into, and the most expeditious way to do that is to drive inclusion and diversity into the way that you're thinking. Yesterday, and I'll shut up very quickly, we're at a digital ventures company yesterday, and when I looked in the room, I said, this is the most diverse room I've ever seen. I mean, we had everything. I mean, just name it, we had it, right? And it wasn't by design, because what we said was we need to have these kinds of skills, and those were the best people who showed up. And when we had it, we came up with 4 real business ideas yesterday in like a 6-hour session that I'm going to go make a lot of money with, right? And I really do believe in the business case for diversity and inclusion. The right thing to do, yeah. But when you show that you challenge the status quo, you come with new ideas, you test those ideas in a respectful way, but then you get the best answer at the end of the day, it really does beat the B in the A/B test. So I really believe in it, and I'm a champion, not just within my own domain, but really in technology at large.
And now we have Nicole, who's my personal hero because she taught my class for me Wednesday nights.
Thank you. I'm Nicole Sanchez. I'm CEO and founder of a consulting firm called Vaya Consulting, which is a joke for those of you who speak Spanish. See, only people who laugh are the people who speak Spanish. I've been working on issues of diversity since 1994 professionally, and my first job working on diversity in tech was in 1999. So way back then, this was not a topic. I was not asked to be on any panels. I wasn't keynoting any conferences. I certainly wasn't teaching at Haas, which I am now. So MBAs in the room, 292T in the spring. Take it. That's my class. And early on, I learned pretty quickly where the barriers are in technology, especially high-growth software technology, where the barriers are to diversity and inclusion. I spent about 4 years, from 2010 to 2014, helping build the Kapor Center for Social Impact, which is doing some great work in Oakland. I then started my own consulting firm and was temporarily brought in-house at GitHub for about 3 years to help build their diversity and inclusion as well as community engagement strategies, because those things go together as far as I'm concerned. And then recently left GitHub to reconfigure my consulting firm, which I'm doing now. I have clients who are VC firms. I have clients who are software companies. I once had a client that was a car company. Bless you for what you do. I don't think I could do that again. That was probably my toughest client ever.
Hey, it's only been 6 weeks. Don't bust.
Oh, sorry. I forgot. You'll be great for 37 years.
It's got to be better.
For the next 37 years. Gee, what would that put me at?
And I'm just really, even though progress is slow, I'm really gratified to have lived long enough to see the progress happening, and that we've moved the conversation around diversity and inclusion. We're starting to move it from counting people and towards calling out the bias in algorithms, which is completely connected. So for those of you who saw the Facebook story this week that broke about what kinds of ads you can buy targeted, and I'm not going to repeat what the target audience is, but if you're interested in this, look at that. That is a direct result of a lack of diversity and a lack of diverse thinking, a lack of diverse perspectives building software. And we will just see more of that, and I firmly believe that the way we are bifurcated as a society will continue to grow unless we can fix that part of technology that rules so much of our lives, from our televisions and our cars to our software that we use explicitly on our computers. We are going to continue to see that gap widen until we can actually pull out the bias, call it out in our software, and fix that.
So of course you already answered the first question.
Oh, good.
Because you are,
thanks, Kelly,
my hero. No, but what works? So you're talking about at the algorithm level, at the diversity of who are building these platforms, the software, the coding. What else have, Sonja and Charles, what have you seen? What are you doing that is working really well? What have you seen other companies do? What is going to work?
What's going to work? I don't think there's one magic pill. I do think half of the battle is getting everyone on the same page, really understanding that this is a problem. And that this is a problem that reaching people in how they need to, in the language that they need to hear. So for some people, it's really easy to say it's the right thing to do. That's all they need, they get it, they're ready to go. And for some people, you need to talk in a business language. You need to say, this is the impact it has on the products you're designing, this is what you're losing, or this is what you can gain. These are the markets you can reach. So for some people, it's just connecting with them like that. The other part of it is understanding that this is not one person's problem, nor an item for one person to drive. I am the leader of diversity and inclusion at Asana. I always say in our meetings that diversity and inclusion, I'm not one team. Everyone has to be on the same page, and everyone has to be driving this, else it's a waste of all our time. And you'll just pay me for fun and giggles, right? I don't say fun and giggles, I say something else. But
I know.
I already swore, go for it.
But that's the reality of it. Everyone has to be driving towards this. And if you're a majority member, and a majority member can be in terms of gender, it can be in terms of race, it can be in terms of ability. Once you're a majority member, you can easily say, I don't have a role to play in this because it's not my problem. That is absolutely when you need to be involved in it. And it's about making sure that you understand why you need to be involved in this and what you can do. The actions, the specific actions, and having that conversation. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you don't know that you don't know. Here's what you need to be doing. Here's where you need to step back and let somebody else get in front. And so having those conversations has been super helpful at my company. And people are very uncomfortable with those conversations. As progressive as you might be, those are some of the hardest conversations to have. So having those conversations, creating a space for those conversations, and then move into action has been what's been really successful.
I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up because Dean Prudence Carter, I can't remember his last name, Dean Carter, shouldn't use my academic titles here, showed that HBR, all diversity focused issue. And one of the things they said was not effective was to have a chief diversity officer. And I would like to hear your view. I have a view, but it will be very hard for me to shut up now and then talk to you.
I think, sorry. So I'm the Chief Diversity Officer, so you know where I'm going to land on this. I think you have a Chief Diversity Officer in the same way that you have a Chief Marketing Officer, a Chief Financial Officer, and a Chief Legal Officer. The CEO is ultimately the person responsible in the company. Those roles should report to the CEO. Those roles should engage with the CEO. But the CEO, these people are specialists and they will drive it. They will engage with the CEO as needed, and they are connecting with him on track. Her.
A fish is the last to discover water. It's how we grow up.
I'm going to sit and think about this tonight. Yes, I will. Yes, so they are responsible for developing the strategy because they know what is going on, but they need to be connected to the CEO. So in the same way that you have those roles and the way those roles work, that's the exact reason that you have a CDO or whatever you call it. So I do think that is an important role.
I completely disagree with what they write about it and agree with you.
But
might want to change it to
But I might
active.
be biased, to be clear.
So am I.
I can take a counter view.
Please do.
Do you have a counter
Please do.
position?
Well, no, not necessarily. I was going to speak from a non-chief diversity officer,
Your chief data officer?
but senior leader perspective, right? I think there are two things you have to do. One, you have to model the behavior. You have to actually people have to look at your org chart and see that it matters to you, period. I mean, that's the first thing. If you can talk about it all day long, but if you don't have it, then you're just talking out of your butt. Then the second thing is you really have to put organizational process in place that forces people to at least consider a diverse slate of candidates. Now, I'm not going to say, well, gee, we don't have any Asians, we need to go hire an Asian. I mean, what I want to know is, of all the people you looked at, what were their backgrounds, and at the end of the day, what were the criteria you used to select the winning candidate, right? And if it never happens that you select a diverse slate, anyone from that slate, then we'll have a conversation. If it always happens, we'll probably, you're probably brown-nosing and trying to get extra points with Charles. And I want to make sure that you're truly hiring the best candidate. In my last job, I only have one person so far, but I'm hiring. In my last job, I had 12 directs, and 7 of them were women. I only had one white male, and he was married to a black woman, so he was honorary, right? So that honestly was not by design. People were like, dude, Charles, really? And we're trying to make up for the whole company, with just your direct staff. And in a way, yes, because if nobody else does it, I have to do it, right? I still have to model it, right? But what we did was we said, let's open up, rather than say, hey, let's go, it was at a bank, right? And if we said, hey, got to be 20 years, one of the 4 big banks, got to be in Minneapolis, Charlotte, or San Francisco, guess what I'm going to get? But if I say, these are the skills I need, and I don't really care what industry they come in, because banking isn't that hard. It's hard, but it's not that hard. What I really want is someone who knows how to do the work, and they're a good leader. Then you get all kinds of candidates. And then what you do is you put them through the gauntlet. Because everybody who gets to that level wants to be respected that they got it on their merit. So you put them through the gauntlet. And I told them, this is going to suck for you. I'm going to put you through like 15 interviews. But at the end of the day, you're going to stand on your own. You're not going to be Charles's guy or lady. You're going to be the best candidate. And everybody's going to recognize that. Now, don't you want to work at that place? And every single one of them was like, yeah, I'm down. And so when you have the process in place and you model the behavior, when the people can look at your org chart, they know you're serious about it. And then they start to say, hey, Charles, I interviewed some people, and guess what? How many diverse candidates I looked at? And, well, what did you think about that? But you have to be able to speak eloquently about it, because I had an older white gentleman on the team in Charlotte, and he said, does this mean that we've got to hire nothing but minorities?
Yes. Oh, no, you didn't say that.
and you have to address that fear and concern, right? And it's like, no. But we want the best candidates. And if you never, ever open the door to the full suite, I use Jackie Robinson all the time. Half the best baseball players were completely excluded. So all you have to do is find a manager who wants to win. I just want to win. So that means I want the best people. I don't care where you're from, what you look like, or any of that stuff. I want to win. And as a candidate, you should always seek out bosses who want to win, because where you went to school, if you went to the same school as them, or if you're a member of the same golf clubs, that stuff doesn't matter to them. They just want to win. So always look for those attributes when you're looking for a job.
So for the opposing counsel.
I actually think we're probably not going to disagree that much. The problem that I have with Chief Diversity Officer as a title is that how I've seen people behave in response to it. The problem isn't with the Chief Diversity Officer. The problem is that so many people lack sophistication about understanding that it's everybody's issue, that they go, oh good, somebody is going to be responsible for that and I don't have to do it. In addition, I actually think that diversity goes along with a bunch of other things that we should all just call culture. And so what I would advocate for is a Chief Culture Officer for which diversity is their responsibility. But regardless of what you call this person, the most important bit of advice I can give people is pull it out of HR. It cannot live in HR anymore. Diversity and inclusion is not, go ahead, hey. It's not an HR issue. Yes, it touches hiring. Yes, it touches recruitment. You laugh. Are you the Chief Diversity Officer in your company? Yeah. Okay, so we have the Chief Diversity Officer from Atlassian here, and she's wonderful, and I respect her work, and I respect Sonja's work, and so their titles don't really matter because they've been able to build communities around this. But ultimately, just pull it out of HR, because here's how it generally goes in tech. Somebody in HR, she's often very young, and she's often white, will say, I'm interested in diversity, and someone will go, oh, thank God, let's give it to her. And she's somewhere like sort of mid to low level in HR, and they say, good, you go figure this out. Takes about 2 weeks for a smart person to go, oh, this is way bigger than I thought it was. But then they go, why aren't you winning? Why aren't you winning? Why aren't you winning? She has no resources, no team, no expertise, no consultants that she can hire. And then a company goes, gosh, why are we still stuck at 2% African-American engineers? The problem is structural. Of course there is racism in your company. Of course there is bias in your hiring process. But fundamentally, you're not going to move the needle if you're not going to change the structure and make sure the person who's responsible for this reports to the CEO, sits at the executive table on the executive team, and has a voice just as important as the CFO, just as important as the chief marketing officer, et cetera. So one of the big things I advocate for is remembering that diversity and inclusion as part of culture, organizational culture, is a discipline as important as any of those other things you can name. Finance, marketing, product, engineering, and until you elevate it like that, you're not gonna win on this at all. And your company actually is gonna be behind, because there are companies who are doing it this way who will lap you, because they're gonna gather up all the talent from all the places, all the best people from all the underappreciated schools or not schools, self-taught, and they're gonna win. And you, who I can say this because I went to Stanford, the guy who hires all his friends from Stanford is going to lose in this next cycle of Silicon Valley. And I'm very interested in helping make that happen.
You're not talking about SoFi, are you? No, not SoFi, sorry. No, this is great. Some of the words I have, Airbnb calls it chief belonging.
That's right.
I love. Who can argue against belonging?
A chief equality at Salesforce.
Chief equality is Tony Proffitt. Yep. I'm curious about the culture, because Francis Fry was hired at Uber as not the chief culture officer, but something of culture.
Like head of culture or something
Fixing
like that.
anything that's not nailed down.
Go make us not look so bad.
Yeah.
Officer.
And then I was just called a chief agitator.
Oh, I like
which
that.
I really like that title. I'm going to put it on my card. Talk about an epic fail that either you have committed or you have seen somebody else. It's always somebody else who did it in this area, so that we can just leapfrog over not trying that.
Ooh.
You said you didn't have an answer. Now
I don't have an answer, but now you said I could talk about other people. Yeah.
Good to know.
I think words are really important in this field, and I think it's easy to say that we're not succeeding because of X or Y. You want to blame it or ascribe it to something. But I think one of the things that it happened to one company, but I feel as though it had a ripple. I know it had a ripple effect on all of us who are really working hard on diversity and inclusion. Was when one company said that they had not made progress because it was a pipeline issue. And I don't believe that. But I also feel that because in an attempt to really narrowly define it, it suggested that we were all thinking like this, because if a company with resources and passion to make a change has boiled it down to this, what is everybody else, and how can everybody else not be thinking like this? So I think that to me was one of the challenges. Yep. I wouldn't call it a failure, I'll call it a challenge that we in the industry have to face in terms of addressing that. It's a lot more nuanced than that. It's not, I don't agree that it's a pipeline problem, but I think it's more of a how are we recruiting problem and where are we recruiting from, and part of that is your pipeline, right? So I think, and that's why I say words matter, and the conversation has shifted, certainly in the last 3 years, from saying this is it to recognizing that it's systemic and that it's industry based. And I think that we all play a role. So that's the one I would.
The previous panelist, Patricia from University of Michigan, if she's still here, I loved it. She called it pathway instead of pipeline. And I thought, let's create pathways. I thought that was great. Charles.
Oh, yeah. So one thing I can most certainly say is that virtually every company in the Fortune 500 is terrible at onboarding and retaining new, diverse executives. And the reason why it starts with executives is that they have the budget and the power to hire people. And yes, it's great when you have your early talent development and you're going to universities and going to HBCUs and targeting young folks. That's terrific, but they have no decision-making power. And if you get the right executives, then they're going to model the behavior, and then it's going to cascade throughout the organization. But companies are terrible at it. Now, my company is actually pretty good at it. And
which company?
This is General Motors, and I'm going to.
You've just been there 6 weeks, though.
I've been there 6 weeks, but I'm going to new employee orientation.
LinkedIn is previous company and just.
Yeah, you'll see what she's talking about. But even then, the CEO and chairman Mary Barra, who is obviously a lady, has taken a lot. I've met more with her in the past 6 weeks than I did the past 3 years with either of the CEOs who were at my previous company. It was a similar sized company, right? And you would think, and she insisted upon being on the interview, slate during the process. It was a whirlwind thing. She said, nope, I got to talk to him. And so I think when you see people at senior levels, reaching out and let me know how I can help. And I know this place isn't easy for someone new because most of us have a lot of tenure. And finding ways, and I've gotten a really great onboarding from senior executives, and of color or not, particularly those who realize, hey, we really need this data thing to work, but none of us know how to do it. So, but we know how this place works, and we can help you be effective. And when you have that at senior levels, that really helps. And then you can foster the environment where difference can make a difference. But when the executives are on a revolving door, you never have anything stick. 2 jobs ago, we started off and there were like 8 of us at the senior vice president level. And then within a 4-year period, I was the last one. And it happened just like that. And I'm like, and so by the time it got down to me, I threw a flag. And I'm like, timeout, right? And most of the people had been asked to leave for whatever reason or another, and I'm like, timeout. I'm not claiming any discrimination here, but there's something in the process that does not trap for it. Now, here's what you spent to recruit us, right? And here's what you're gonna spend to replace us when we leave, and you don't have enough time, effort, or money to put a trap in a place that says, gee, by the time you go from 8 to 6, you probably want to pause and do something. 6 to 4, hold up, time out. And when you get down to 2, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right? And so, and so, but the cascade effect was that we all mentored people there, we all promoted people there, and then now we're gone. And now those people don't have the air cover, and they're kind of landlocked by it's a geographically based company, and so most of the people are from that area, so they might not be able to leave, but they have no air cover. And so there's no one looking to promote them and raise them up anymore. So, if you don't take care of the executives, then the environment really cannot happen. It really can't. And companies have to get good at the onboarding and retention of senior people who have a heart to do the right thing and to drive diversity because it's a business imperative.
That's great.
I'll talk about another systemic failure that I see over and over again. And that's about how you handle employee resource groups. Because I think that employee resource groups, folks think, well, that's an obvious next step. So now we've got some diversity. Let's get everybody to group themselves together and they can form a social club. Now, that's a really good thing to start with. I'm going to be very clear. I actually believe in ERGs because especially as you're building diversity in a company that is predominantly anything, that's predominantly white, which is generally what we're talking about, and you start to hire folks from underrepresented backgrounds, there need to be spaces where folks can go and be in community with each other and say, this weird thing happened. Is that just how that exec is? And then they say, yeah. Or like, did you all notice that there's a Cinco de Mayo party coming up? Are you nervous? I'm nervous, right? Like those kinds of, like maybe we should get ahead of this. So that's kind of what ERG, right? I mean, we've all, everybody, I fear Cinco de Mayo every year because I'm like, please, just don't have a party. In fact, I don't go to work sometimes on Cinco de Mayo because I'm like, I don't want to see how this is going to pan out. And that's just real because it's like, I don't want to get in front of it. I don't want to be anywhere near it. So you get ERGs and they talk about these things. The problem here is that only goes for so long. You can form a social club and hang out with each other. And then at a certain point, people go, well, what are we doing? What are we doing here? And people start to, membership starts to fall off. And the big problem here is that companies are not leveraging the wisdom of their ERGs for their product. If Pepsi had leveraged the wisdom of their black ERG, would they have done that? Which Jenner was it?
One of the Jenners.
Kendall.
The Kendall Jenner protest, police, Black Lives Matter commercial. Hell no. They never would have done it. And Pepsi employs black folks. They're there. So a simple, hey, we'd like to screen this for you. Forget even like preventing the commercial from being made. Before we put this out into the world, we would like our own black employees to look at it and react. Do you think it ever would have seen the light of day if they took that ERG seriously? No. So a systemic thing, a failure that keeps happening over and over again, it happens in schools, it happens in every workplace, many workplaces, is connecting those communities that are building with each other with the product, with the customer. Here's what they use ERGs for. Can we take your picture and put it on the website so people like you know that people like you work here? Okay, hey, we've got this college recruiting fair at HBCUs. We know who we need out there. And then your ERG is like, okay, so you trot us out? Like you trot us out when it helps, but you don't actually ask for our brain power when you're about to make a Kendall Jenner Black Lives Matter Pepsi commercial. And that's where the frustration and tension starts to come to a head. And so that if companies knew how to leverage ERGs to inform their product, their marketing decisions, and those kinds, their executive hiring, that would be a great way to leverage ERGs.
That's great.
Until they do that, it's going to be very difficult to actually get the power of a diverse workforce, integrated into what you're doing day to day.
I think for me, just piggybacking on something you're saying there around that, I'll use the Pepsi commercial as the example. Even if the ERGs weren't shown it, I would hope that, first of all, there must have been a black or non-majority employee somewhere in that loop. And that someone would have felt that they had created an environment where they were comfortable enough to raise a concern that something like this might impact or have a negative effect on the product. And so to me, it speaks about how are you also creating an environment where you don't necessarily need to use the ERG, but you also feel as an employee that you can say something because there was somebody who would have seen it and said, this is gonna be a problem, let me step back.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
But that they have a voice that they can share and signal concerns. So that to me is something really interesting as well.
And that's why having diverse backgrounds at the table, coming from diverse backgrounds of companies, educational backgrounds, not just on the gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, because I mean, if you create that environment, you can positively affect things, but you can also prevent a lot of things too. But I want to say one last thing on ERGs. So we've got a pretty rich one at General Motors, and we had a decent one at Wells, where I was before. But the question when someone says, "Hey, can you be a leader of, just an executive sponsor?" I say, "Okay, so what are your metrics?" Not how many social gatherings you had,
That's right.
or
That's right.
But I want to know, do you get anything out of this? And I'm a metrics person, so I want to know how many people who got mentored by people like me got promoted.
Yep.
Right? I want to know how many people we brought in from the outside by tapping into this network rather than having to go to an executive recruiter. I want to know, how many, what's our retention rate, and has that changed since we put these programs into place? And if you're not measuring it and running it like a business, it's just a club. And you don't need the company for the club. You just get together and hang out and have beers after work. But I mean, I would rather spend my time making a measurable difference, so at the end of the day we can say, because we had this in the programs we put into place, this is the amount of impact that we had. Then we can come to conferences like this and say, if you want to have these kinds of numbers, these are the things you're going to have to do. And and that's what we believe. I certainly myself, as an evangelist of this, is my responsibility to tell people how they can get these kinds of results as well. And I know you do, obviously, because you're consulting.
Yeah, so we actually did this at my last company, and we experimented first with the Black ERG specifically. And we said, what do you want your metrics to be to the ERG? Because they were founding it, and retention was a big part of what they said. We want to look out for each other. Retention and promotion were two of those things. And when we measured after just a year of retention across the board, and then we just honed in on our Black employees, they way over-indexed on retention and promotion. And every single person, these are small numbers, right? We're not the size of General Motors, but it was an interesting beta to say, what do you attribute your retention? And every single Black employee said being part of that organization. And having executive sponsor, I was the executive sponsor for that. And knowing that you were sitting at the executive table on the executive team, representing the things that we said to you. Sadly, we didn't have a Black executive. I was happy to do it. It would have been better if we'd had a Black executive.
Honorary. Yeah.
I was, yeah. You can give me that distinction. I'll take it. I can come to the cookout. That's the Twitter way of saying honorary. The thing that we saw was, as we invested in them and we give them budgets. That was the other real thing. Is we said we're gonna make sure you are funded. And we're not going to really be like, how are you spending every dime? But what do you expect to do with this investment? And it was a per head investment. So every time we added somebody to the ERG, then they got another bump in their budget. And the big thing they kept saying was retention, because we're losing Black talent in tech at such an alarming rate. That was the big thing that they said. And we absolutely, within 12 months, saw that change. Retention went across the board for the company was at about 79%. On average, and then for that group it was 88%. And we even interviewed them about Black folks we had lost from that group, and they understood why we had lost every single one, as in, for those of you who do HR, there's regrettable departure, non-regrettable departure. Every single one was a non-regrettable departure, meaning someone wasn't doing their job well, whatever. And so that speaks about something that was working there. And we absolutely tied dollars and metrics, the outcomes, to what we would do with the ERG. So.
Why did you leave that company? Never mind. Different panel. I wanted just so much talent and wisdom and just experience and humor on this panel. I want to open it up to questions. Because we can talk forever.
Hello. Just a quick question, kind of following up on the ERG thing. So how would you possibly suggest that you kind of change that role of an ERG when it's kind of been established that we do the events, like we do Women's History Month and we do Black History Month, and unfortunately it's a minor party, how do you kind of change what the focus has become? Like that they are trying to be serious, but they're also really kind of doing event planning. Like how do you then change it to this idea of promotion, retention, recruiting?
I mean, I could talk a lot about it, but why don't you talk about what you all have done if you want to talk about it?
Sure. So I don't have an event planning kind of ERG, and our ERGs are new. So this is a different, we're starting from a different place. So when we established the ERGs, we really set about establishing what were the goals that seemed right for the community that this specific ERG was trying to serve. And I still think that that's something that the ERG can do at any time, even if it's been established for a while. It's something that, you know, it's almost like in the same way you would do a business planning session for the year or for a 2-year period, I absolutely think an ERG should be doing that, because needs change, goals change. And perhaps it's time to do that and figuring out what are you trying to achieve. For some groups, it was around retention. For some, it was engagement. For some, it was leadership, so personal development, career coaching, and so on. So it's about what are the things that make sense, and then what are the tactics you're going to use, and then what are the metrics you're going to use to drive it. That's how we've approached it. We have just 3 groups. We have Asana Women, which focuses on our women in the office. We have Gradient, because we don't have enough of anything, so we have a group for people of color. Yeah. And we have Real Talk.
Yeah.
And we have Team Rainbow, which focuses on our LGBTQIA community. And each group had different needs. And each group's objectives are different. Women has a couple of events, but they also do other stuff around training and resource development. So it's about thinking of it like that, I feel.
Yeah, at my last company, you know, the first thing is lots of times the leadership of those organizations gets stale. And if you want different, you know, a different type of thinking, you'll have to treat it as if it's a job and say, look, you know, what we're going to do is upgrade this job. You know, thank you for the person who's gotten us to this point. We'll ask you to continue to, you know, be a sponsor or something, but you know, having a turnover, and then, you know, really being serious about who you put in that role. So at the last place, I was part of the Asian American because they encouraged us all to join somebody other than your kind of homeroom, which I thought was a good idea. And then 2, the guy who was the president globally happened to report into me. And so, you know, we spent a lot of time thinking about, you know, how do we like turbocharge this and really get serious about it so it's not just a social club, and really just treat it as if you're a nonprofit that's trying to get funding. You're not going to get funding if you don't have metrics that say that you moved the social ill that you're designed to solve, and tie the funding to that. And if you get serious about it and treat it like a business, people will treat it like a business, not just the people within it, but the people who are watching it happen. And once again, I'm all about the right thing to do, I really am, but I mean, businesses are in business for one thing, and that's to maximize profit and shareholder return. Right? And if you can show that this drives business outcome, even if you reduce it to the cost of recruiting in replacement, you can say that because we have this is the impact that we're having on the business, because you want to show up and say, okay, I've got ROI, I want more investment.
2 things. One, and I think Charles brought this up, that's really important. The woman who founded the Black ERG that I was speaking about also reported into me. And so I got to make the decision to release some of her time, her work time, so that she could do that as part of her job, which was a really important structural decision we made, so that she wasn't doing extracurricular work on top of her regular job. And so we released 5 hours a week of her job, so 40 hours a week, 5 hours a week, for her to do the organizing. And that made a huge difference in just getting it up to speed and allowing her to prioritize it. And then it ebbed and flowed up, you know, between 2 hours a week to 10 hours a week, depending on if it was a run up to an event. But we stayed in communication about that, and that became an important structural piece. The other piece I would suggest, other than hire my consulting firm, because we can help you do this, the other piece I would suggest is, as your leadership or your company, however you decide what your business imperatives are right then, share them explicitly with the ERG and say, the problem we're trying to solve right now is customer engagement, right? Or something like that. We're losing customers, right? Something that is very tied to everything else everybody's thinking about in any context. Our employee turnover is too high. We're outgrowing this office space, and we're going to need to figure out how to go to a distributed workforce. Whatever the big organizational problem is, that you're currently working on, share it with your ERG. Because the solutions that they're going to come up with are going to be very different than the solutions that your executive team comes up with or whoever else is working on this. And they can add their data, they can add their opinion and that data into you making this decision. They're going to come at it from a completely different angle. And I like the idea of really naming leaders. Without leadership and without that leadership being recognized, it's very difficult to sustain a social club, let alone an ERG when you have a 40, 50, 60, 70 hour a week job. So those are the things I would add.
How about another question?
Hi, I've worked in Silicon Valley for 15 years, and it's exciting to see the issues that we saw happening 10 years ago, or like forever, now on the front pages. But I'm really frustrated with the framing of where we're centering the problem, which is with people of color and with women, and not centering it on the white male leadership of this industry. And like, I keep waiting for somebody to organize, like VCs do like a book club during Black History Month on some literature about the historical and lived experiences, and take whatever your diversity month is, like how are these leaders actually learning about and changing what they know? Like as the first speaker or the earlier speaker said, there's this gap amongst white people, which I've gone through my own learning in the last 10 years. I'm like, oh wow, I had no idea, because it's not taught in schools. So I'm interested in like what educational programming is being given to, or is anybody even doing this to the white leadership in Silicon Valley?
Nicole has an answer.
I do have an answer. I'm actually, at the risk of trying to sell again, I do executive coaching specifically for white tech leaders. And the thing we work on is, how do you even start? Because here's what they say. I'm scared to open my mouth on this topic because I'm scared of looking like a fool because I don't know anything about it, because they also didn't learn it in school, weren't taught it by their parents for whatever reason, right? You can judge the reason that they are not aware of what's going on. But I was sitting with a VC once, a really well-known VC, and I'm doing a coaching session. And his questions were so basic. But he had no place to ask them, because he says something in public, someone's going to tweet it. He says something in front of his company, everybody's going to go up in arms, because there are a whole lot of people around him who know way more than he does about this topic. So he's petrified to say anything. So his questions are so basic, like, can you recommend a book I can read about the Black experience in America? And I have to, as somebody who's put myself out there like this, I have to not judge. Because if we're going to bring this group forward, they've got to have some place where they can just be handed a handful of books. Tell me why you prefer Latino and I shouldn't call you Hispanic. Okay, we can talk about that too. And getting them comfortable with it, and their big graduation from this is giving a presentation to their company about their commitment to diversity and inclusion, and that is petrifying to most of these people. And so I don't know, that's what my contribution is right now. It's interesting to hear what these folks are talking about. But the failure is absolutely, like you said, on an education system, and an elite education system for a lot of these folks, that let them go through all the way, and they say, no, I've never heard of, you know, Sandra Cisneros or Bell Hooks or Franz Fanon, or, you know, I don't know what any of that is. The last thing I'll say is, I've been recruited by a very big tech company. I won't say what it is. It rhymes with Dougal. 3 times. I don't know. What are they going to? Anyway. 3 times. And every time we get to the final stages, and here's what they say. And I didn't apply for these jobs, so it's very flattering, right? I get to the final round, and this has been different parts of the organization, different people, different years, and they say the same thing. Wow, you would be perfect if only you had a degree in computer science. And I say, if I had a degree in computer science, I wouldn't know the stuff I know. Because I guarantee you that somebody with a degree in computer science doesn't know what I know. This is an actual discipline that I work on. You are not going to get where you think you're going to need, where you need to go, if everybody you hire has a computer science degree. It is an important skill. It is not the only skill. And you have shot yourselves in the foot right out of the gate by deciding that that's something you need. And it's like, yeah, but everybody knows a little about race. Everybody knows a little about gender. I'm like, not like this, right? This is something I've honed for 25 years. And Kelly McElhaney is the leading researcher on women in business and how their returns are higher. Gosh, Kelly, I wish you had a computer science degree. Kelly wouldn't be doing the work she does.
I would be making a lot more money.
That's probably true. We both would. But I guess all of that is to say we've got to pull out some of the original assumptions about what makes up the tech ecosystem to begin with and what people are walking in with. You can be a billionaire and you can't say the phrase African American without turning bright red and stuttering. That's not okay. You can't be a leader in the 21st century and not be able to do that.
Sonja has some.
So what I was going to say was two things. One is there's someone whose product we use probably more often than we'd like to, who does not have a degree in CS, to be clear. But what I was going to say to respond, and you just touched on it, is I've been lucky to be in a company where one of the first things I said to our CEO was, I'm going to say things that make you absolutely uncomfortable. And you will need to get comfortable with that. And what I've always said in front of the company is that if the only thing that I succeed in doing is leaving you all by saying, we have 5 black candidates. No, we have 5 black candidates. If you are saying black or African American or Hispanic and not saying diverse or underrepresented or kind of using these terms that are soft and make you feel comfortable, if all I get you to do is talk about race in the same way that we talk about everything else, I'll feel as though I've succeeded. Because I think it's about the education system and it's about getting comfortable with things that are not comfortable and that is easy to just bypass. You have to read. I can only give you the books. I shouldn't be giving you the books. You know that this is an issue. You should be looking up these things. Google is your friend, all right? Except when it isn't. These resources exist. And some companies and some people are really just more equipped to do it, and some people just need a little more coaching. But it's something that I feel as though I have to do it, but I don't necessarily think it's something that I have to do. Does that make sense? So.
How about one more question? 2, we'll try for 2.
She's been waiting a while.
To kind of go back
Patient.
to the, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To go back to kind of the recruiting side, you guys, we've talked a number of times in a few of these sessions now about kind of like finding the right candidate and going after, opening it up so that you get these diverse candidates. But I guess my question is are there times when you feel like you should just say, hey, let's spend the next 3 weeks, I only want to see female candidates, or I only want to see minorities, or I only want to see, just so that you can kind of force it? Because I do wonder if sometimes it's like, well, we want the best candidate, and then it just ends up being that you get another white man, and I'd just love to know what you guys think about that.
I'm going to ask Charles to take it, and then I'm going to move to one more question, as opposed to everybody taking it, and then we'll get 2 questions in. Go.
Oh, okay, so I was just talking with a lady I've used to recruit people in the past. And I'm hiring a very specific role. And she said, so what are you looking for? I said, a woman. And she said, huh? What do you mean by that? And I said, look, the nature of the role, okay, so let me, a little bit of background. New companies born in the digital era do not have chief data officers. They don't need them because that's how they do business. Old companies that need to change the way they do business need someone who's accountable for that, which means that it's an influence game. It's not about who writes the best code or who can build the best models. It's about changing cultural behavior, right? And so, in this particular role, this is the tip of the spear for my group. And this person needs to be really, really good at winning people over to their side. And my experience has been the ladies who've worked for me do it better than the men. They just do. And that's been the last 4 jobs I've had. And these are people I've usually reported to 2 down from a CEO or something like that, big companies. And they usually do. But here's the thing. If you say, but they all have to be PhD data scientists, forget it, right? I mean, my PhD specialization is organizational behavior. I'm not a data scientist per se. I've built models. I've done that work. But that hasn't what's got me to this level. And I'm a 3-time chief. This is my 3rd time being a chief data officer, right? It's kind of worked for me, right? Just a little. Just a little. But the point is, it's really the ability to communicate It's the ability to really explain it to your grandma. It's the ability to find collaborative wins. It's the ability to help make other people effective and be a collaborative winner. That's kind of my brand, right? And once again, when I just look at all the people, the thousands of people I've managed over the years, right? They tend to skew women who do that. And so I think the thing is that in that particular case, I was like, absolutely. Now, will it be one? We'll see, right? But I want to make sure that there's some in that pile when we go through those resumes and we talk to candidates. And at the end, let the winner win, because I think anybody who wants to compete, that's the way they want it to be. The winner is the winner, right? Because they're the best candidate. But if you don't even consider them, if they don't even know the job exists, how can they possibly compete?
Yeah, that's a great answer. You had a question, and you've had your hand up patiently, so we'll go there, and then we'll go to lunch.
Thank you. I just wanted to, thanks. I just wanted to ask, this is going back to the question about whether a chief diversity officer is needed as opposed to a chief belonging officer, I think you mentioned, and something that we can all sort of identify and agree with. How do you balance that, this idea of a chief, chief something broader officer from becoming a Black Lives Matter to All Lives Matter kind of, nefarious thing? And I hope that I'm encapsulating what I'm asking with that final metaphor.
I think I understand that what you mean is how do you do, let me make sure, how do you do inclusion without compromising the integrity of a point of view and letting everything in? Is that correct?
Well, I think the concern I have is more that if you take the diversity officer title and stick it into belonging or climate or love or what have you, then the concerns become much broader, and then the diversity piece becomes suddenly a whole lot less important.
I see. Yeah, you can't do that. I mean, if you're going to be a chief culture officer or a chief community officer, front and center in your job description needs to be, this person is responsible for diversity along these metrics, right? The other part that I think that companies shy away from, and I still don't understand this, is they forget that they can draw a border around the culture that they want to build. They can decide who belongs in it, then once you're in it, you belong. They can also decide who doesn't belong in it. And one of the things that we did at an earlier company I worked with was we implemented part of an interviewing experience with an hour talking about diversity and inclusion for every candidate, no matter what they were interviewing for. So when they come on site for their day-long meeting everybody, they're towards the end, an hour where we just discussed diversity. And it was every single person we interviewed from any background, any function. And we asked them a simple question. We said, why do you think tech isn't more diverse? Their reaction to that told us a lot about how they think about it. They didn't need to be experts. A winning answer, a passing answer is, I don't know, but I read this really interesting article. I don't know, but at my last company I saw. I was just talking to my partner about this the other day and blah, blah, blah. That's a winning answer. But what you've done is you've signaled, we don't have time for anybody who comes in and says, because you give a little girl a computer and you give a little boy a computer and the little girl doesn't care about it and the little boy is interested in it, which we had happen, and we didn't hire that person. So you get to draw.
You drew a border.
What?
You drew the border.
We drew the border, and we said, look, we believe in inclusion, but guess what? We also get to decide where that ends. And I don't ever want to fall for the idea that in my company, for example, if you want to come in and interview with me and you want to make an eloquent argument about all lives matter, I'm going to tell you, you may meet every criteria. I probably won't hire you, and it has nothing to do with your political opinion and everything to do with the fact that we're on a mission going this way, and this isn't going to get us where we need to go. You are entitled to your opinion. You get to go have it out in the world. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not going to badmouth you, but you know what? If you need to tell me that all lives matter and that's the orientation to diversity you have, you and I won't work well together. And I'm the CEO. And I get to make that decision. And so I think one of the things that we forget is that when you take a Facebook, and they're more like a utility now, right? So everything's okay. No, they also get to draw their borders. And I recently advised someone who has a very large social network online, and they have tens of millions of daily active users. And I said, if you draw a border around behavior like this, in this case it was trolling, if you draw a border around behavior like this and you say, we're going to implement a code of conduct and we're going to just start kicking people off when they violate it. Because we don't have time to do all this management of like, well, you know, what did they mean by adding that swastika to their, you know? we don't have time for it. We have other things to do. And I said to the CEO, how many users are you willing to lose of your 20-something million? And he said, 100,000, 500,000. Once they did it, they lost 5 people total. So I don't know why companies are so confused by this idea that everything has to be okay, because it doesn't. Go find another company that's about all lives matter. I'm sure you'll have a great time over there, and we'll be in competition with you over here, and we will beat you. So I guess, and I like the idea about the winning, right? Because I'm going to win. I'm going to hire people who see what's happening in the 21st century, and they're going to take us there. And I don't know if that quite answered your question, but I have a very, clearly, a very strong opinion about drawing parameters around what inclusion means.
Hearing Nicole Sanchez talk about the word border, I just was trying to get my head
And I said, I changed it to parameter. I changed it to parameter. Better. There's no wall. There's no. I'm not the Mexican who's going to pay for it, Kelly.
I love you guys. Thank
thanks,
you
Kelly.
so much. We get to go to lunch, and Morgan's going to tell us.